All right, welcome back. We are so glad you're here. If you did not check out video 1, that's where we kind of kicked off this little mini-series helping people who are asking the question, should I homeschool? And so that had a lot of really great information and just considerations as we want to encourage families to go in authentically, holistically, open-minded. We're huge homeschool advocates. We would love to see more people homeschool, but we, like you had said in the last one of the things that I really appreciated hearing was this has to work for everybody. It can't just work for kids. It actually, it has to be for the whole family. And so that's where those considerations are really important. Yeah. So if you missed it, go back, find video 1, and then you can jump back in with us today. And our topic for today is going to be all about curriculum. Once you've decided, curriculum is a big deal. So curriculum, of all the things that you talked about the last time of like the next steps, the curriculum, the schedule, extracurriculars, curriculum sounds like not the fun one to me. Like that's not my favorite.
It's not
so why is starting with curriculum actually pretty important?
Well, I mean, if you look at this big picture, you're deciding where to steer this ship of your children's education. And so you need to understand what your priorities are. And once you identify those priorities, it will be easier to select curriculum. But as we said in the last video, it's never easy because honestly, the economics of homeschooling and the marketing to homeschoolers has just exploded.
Yeah.
And so there are literally thousands of options out there for you. And so I think later we're going to give you some recommendations about great places to look up curriculum reviews and recommendations that are neutral. And so that will help for sure. But yeah, there are so many things to consider. You need to consider how much time you have to prep. And so some curricula is just out of the box, ready for parents to go. Some requires some preparation. Of course, this won't surprise you. The curriculum that requires a little bit of preparation is probably the better curriculum. And then you're able to have that flexibility and adapt it to your own children and that sort of thing.
And that's a really good point. Like, not all curriculum is created equally.
No.
So even though all of the marketing has exploded and there are more options than ever before, in some ways that's a good thing, but it also means there's a lot of not great stuff mixed in there.
Yeah.
And there are some great free options, and then there's some really not great free options,
For sure.
and everything in between, even for paid curriculum.
Right.
There's a lot to consider there.
Right.
So what are the things that families should be considering when they are evaluating whether or not a curriculum is a good fit for their family? Like you mentioned, like the level of prep, and that's,
Prep
you know,
time.
as we're thinking holistically about does this work for our family, we've got to consider what are the time constraints. So that's definitely one. What are some of the other things that they need to look at?
I think another one that's really important is the individual wiring of your child. And that's not to say that if you are homeschooling 3 children, you should have 3 completely different sets of curriculum. Please don't do that. No one can do that healthily. Well, I shouldn't say no one. No one I know can do that healthily. I sure couldn't. No. But you do need to consider how your children are wired. So, you know, some of the curriculum is very much more hands-on, more what we call kinesthetic. There's a lot of movement involved. Whereas some curriculum is a little bit more, I have my paper, I have my pen, and I do my work here. And you already know this if you have more than one child, they're not all wired the same way. And so if you can find a curriculum that you can either adapt one way or the other, or that is just a good match for your child's learning style, I think you will be so much further ahead. But I would add a little caveat to that. It wouldn't be realistic to look at your sweet little first grader and say, what is your learning style? Because when they're that little, they're all just hands-on. They just want to go.
It's all kinesthetic, yeah.
So I will share with you, I have a really strong bias against like online school and online curriculum for little ones. I haven't met many of them for whom that's a really great fit because, you know, we like to think of learning as, you know, sort of the easy way to look at it is I'm downloading information into my child's brain, but that's not really what it is. It's actually something that's very social and collaborative and done together. And the younger the child, the more together there needs to be for that to be really solid learning.
Right. And that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be with other kids. It can include other kids for sure, but definitely some collaboration between mom, child, family members.
Interaction, communication.
Your first, second, third grader should not be responsible for self-learning, self-directed learning in the sense that they are gleaning all the information themselves.
Right. Now, when we're working with families who are transitioning to the field in missions or something like that, sometimes there is a small season in which that's just necessary, that we do need a little bit of plug and play. But hopefully that's a really short, small season, and then you can get back to higher quality materials and more rich interactions.
Just a good thing to consider as well. Just because you decide on a curriculum now does not mean that you necessarily have to stick with it. So there's a degree of flexibility there in, it feels a little bit like a push-pull to me in the sense that, like, I don't think I would want to switch up curriculum every single year or multiple times a year and try to just, let's try this one this time. Let's try this one this time. I think there's some good in the continuity of curriculums being able to build on each other. But if season of life or circumstances change, or if you learn more about your student's learning style or something changes, there is the flexibility. You don't have to hold so tightly to that.
You said something really good there I want to make a note of. I will say, especially in math, that popping around from curriculum to curriculum isn't something that really creates gaps in children's learning, because if you think about all of the curriculum developers, they might put certain concepts at slightly different times in a school year, and even in slightly different grades. And so naturally, if we have a sweet sixth grader who's come to us here at Learnwell who's been in 5 different homeschooling curriculums for math, they're just going to have some significant gaps. And so so we want to both encourage you to take advantage of that flexibility and change curriculum when you need to, but also once you find what is working, I would encourage you to stick with it.
Yeah, I think that's really good counsel.
Okay, so we talked about time of parent prep. We've talked about child's learning style.
Yes.
Of course, you're going to look at the cost. Costs are wildly variable for homeschooling curriculum. That would be another factor. For those who do serve on the field, you have to think about the portability. And so there are some that have maybe a digital download that you can print as needed from a PDF, whereas others have lots and lots of pieces.
Right. And or do you live in a place that things can be delivered to you? I mean, that's something, that's why we're doing the series now instead of 2 weeks before school starts.
Right. Absolutely.
There's some time that's going to go into
preparation.
That too.
And even for those of us that are just homeschooling here in our home country, you need some time for that preparation as well, and you need to consider your space. But I will say, don't look on Pinterest at homeschooling spaces, please, unless that is just a great joy for you. It is not necessary to have a pristine Pinterest-worthy homeschooling space in order to do this. However, before you consider a curriculum, do consider what all you will have to store, what your child will be using daily or weekly, whatever that looks like, and just consider the space.
And we are going to talk about that more in the next video when we get into some of those specific logistics as far as how do we make a whole yearly schedule? How do we decide what our daily schedule looks like? Some of those really practical nuts and bolts, as well as what is actually needed for a homeschooling space. So we're gonna touch on more of that next time. But it's a good thing to keep in mind, even as we're doing curriculum, what kind of space do you have? Because what is actually needed? That portability factor could be really key for some families.
Could be, absolutely.
So, all right. So learning styles. Just those limitations. We talked a lot about the limitations in the first ones, kind of what those boundaries need to be, and resources. Many resources, portability.
And then the only other thing I can think of is just make sure that you read the introduction, the foreword, whatever's on the website for a particular curriculum, and just make sure you understand what their what their worldview is, what their education background is. I'm certainly not, I'm a homeschool advocate. I don't believe that everyone that homeschools needs to have an education degree or anything like that, but I sure would like it in the people who write the curriculum for my children that I'll be using. And so just take a look at what those qualifications are and just make sure this is a high quality curriculum.
Yeah, absolutely. So many good things to think about. That also feels a little bit daunting to try to like hold all of those things and juggle all those considerations at once. So we actually have more resources for you that we're going to share with you. We actually have a spreadsheet or a worksheet rather that we are going to share that has a lot of those considerations kind of to help you evaluate curriculum. So once you kind of narrow it down to like, I think I'm choosing kind of between these math curriculums, I think I'm choosing between these for writing, you can actually print off this worksheet and be able to use it to evaluate the different points, kind of like your own personal pro-con. It is important to realize that, you know, as with any good pro-con list, not everything is created equally. Like your resources may be a higher factor than something else. And so, you know, just because something has more checks on one side,
you know, prioritize
you still have to actually decide what is the most meaningful. But we have found this to be a helpful way of just synthesizing things on paper and making that a little bit easier and less overwhelming than looking at 800,000 options. With that, we also are going to link to some other resources for you that are not LearnWell resources, they're not developed by us, but are just super helpful. You want to talk about some of those?
Yes, so one of those is, if you don't know about Kathy Duffy and her evaluation site, that's a great place to start and just look at what her, she makes many recommendations in every area for every grade level. So that's just a great place to start and get a sense for what's the curriculum that's been around a while and what has been the experience with some families with the particular curriculum. So that's pretty unbiased review there.
Yeah, and her site is really user-friendly. You can both like search, like if you've come along, or if you've come across a curriculum, or you know somebody else who's using one and you just want to learn more about it. They do some really in-depth kind of deep dives into explanations that you can just search. But she also has lists like here are the top, 100 math curriculums or the top whatever for each subject level. If you're finding the whole world of resources to be too much, they can kind of help.
Which is to say you're normal. If you're just getting
started. So many options. That's a really great way to kind of help ferret it down.
And then I think we were also going to link to our LearnWell in our blog. Early in LearnWell days, we wrote a whole series about learning styles. And so, and again, I would encourage you not to think of it as a child is just solidly in one bucket or another. It's normal for children to be a little bit visual, a little bit auditory, a little bit kinesthetic, but just to consider what those and even other paradigms of learning styles might be. And it's just a great pair of glasses to put on as you look at your children individually to just think about, okay, what does a great education look like for this child? And so we'll link to that as well.
So all of that should be able to, in the show notes, this isn't a podcast, so it's not really show notes, in the video notes, right there underneath. And that's why I'm pointing here, because supposedly you're watching on a computer, and so it should be right underneath us, where those links should be. And those will hopefully be able to help you out. Like I said, next time we're going to dive a little deeper into kind of the practical nuts and bolts, kind of getting your feet wet into some things. But this is a lot to kind of hold on to right now. So I think we're going to wrap it up there and
sounds good.
Look forward to next time.
See you soon.